Okay, folks, I'm going to get started just because we've got a longer presentation tonight. We want to make sure we get through it and get wrapped up as close to 8:30 as possible. So, my name is Andy Bennett. I am not Rich Kelsky. His name is up here in the corner, but I'm not Rich. I'm Andy. So, I'm a director with the association, and we're just grateful that everybody's here tonight. We've got a great presentation from the forest fire guys. Should go back here about forest fire risk, prevention, and experiences. We've got three guys with us, Jeremy, Joe, and uh, Dave or David. Going with, doesn't matter. Okay. You'll hear more from these guys in just a few minutes, but just want to do a couple quick things here. Thank you to our presenters from last month. We had a great presentation from kind of a conglomerate of folks. Tricia from Nature Conservancy, Richard from New Jersey Conservation Foundation, Peter from the American Farmland Trust. And the webinar was titled Preservation Options for Forests and Farms. And as usual, you can, if you missed it, you can go back on our YouTube channel and you can see that, just like this presentation tonight. If you want to watch it again, you can check it out on our channel. We'll have it up there within a day or two. Stay tuned for announcements for our next backyard forestry, which would be the third Thursday of the month in February. We think we have a speaker lined up, but we're not 100% sure. So just stay tuned for that. We'll send an invite out and a notification. Also, just like to highlight, save the date for Saturday, March 15th at Rutgers University. The Forestry Association will be hosting their annual meeting. This is our 50th annual meeting, so it's pretty exciting for us. The topic is called this, A Land Ethic for the 21st Century, exploring the interconnectedness of people and the land. So we're really excited about that. We have a presenter coming up from Georgia as our keynote, and then we'll have a variety of different other speakers, some of our partner organizations, including these guys from Forest Fire. They probably don't even know this yet, but they'll be participating at some level, at least one or two of them. So please sign up for, or actually the sign up's not live yet, but you'll be seeing that hopefully within a week or so. Sign up as quick as you can. Spots fill up really fast because we can only hold 120 people or something like that. So please sign up once you see that announcement. Like I said before, if you miss one of these presentations, you can always look it up on YouTube. And if you just want to rewatch one, I imagine tonight there's going to be a lot of good information. You may miss something. You feel free to listen to it again. Lastly, if you're not a member of the association, we'd love to have you join us. We try to do a lot of different things. You see a list of things we do there, including this backyard forestry program, including the annual meeting, but there's a lot of other things we do and we tackle. One of the main things we do is monitor legislation and do regulatory advocacy. So that's a big part of what we do. It's an important part of what we do, is representing our membership, especially those properties that are farmland assessed through a forestry plan. So join us if you can, if you're not already a member, and we always appreciate donations too to help this thing go. So thank you. Lastly, we've got our liability disclaimer. I'll just read it. The information in our presentations is provided for general informational purposes only. We make no claims, promises, representations, or guarantees about the accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or suitability of the contents of any presentation and its applicability to specific persons, properties, or activities. We expressly disclaim liability for errors and omissions in the contents of any presentation, and you are advised to consult with your own professionals and advisors. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to these guys. And oh yeah, so lastly, as you're watching, the Q&A and the chat are functioning. Let's try to do the Q&A. It's easier if it all ends up in one spot for me as I'm keeping track of it. But just drop a question in there if you have one. We also have, thank you everybody for submitting questions as you signed up. I have that list here. We may not have time for too many questions. We're going to do our best. I think if you pay attention in their presentation as I was going through the questions that were submitted and I was reviewing them with these guys, a lot of the questions you posed, they're going to cover in their presentation already. So, but feel free to drop something in the Q&A. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And Joe, take it away.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks for the invite. Like Andy said, the three of us are supervising forest fire wardens with the New Jersey Forest Fire Service. We represent the state statewide, and I'm going to let Jeremy jump right into it. Um, so,
All right, thanks, Joe. Go ahead and advance the next slide there. Are you able to advance it, Joe?
I think I got a little lag here.
Okay, great. All right, welcome everyone. As Andy and Joe stated, my name is Jeremy Weber. I'm a supervising forest fire warden. I oversee the prescribed fire and training programs for the state. Tonight, we're going to cover a couple different things. We're going to be reviewing the New Jersey fire risk, response, and response structure. We're going to assess the 2024 prescribed fire season. We're also going to investigate some experiences and lessons learned from this past 2004 fire season. And lastly, we're going to explore the forest fire prevention and awareness programs across New Jersey's fire dependent landscapes. Go ahead and next slide, please. So historically, New Jersey has no stranger to fires on the landscape. The map that you see on the left there is a map that shows the historical fires from 1924 to 2024. So that's a 100-year span of time for fires across the landscape. And these are fires that are 100 acres or greater across the landscape. There's numerous additional fires that are smaller than that, but don't meet that 100-acre qualification. So if you look at that, a lot of people might think that the northern part of the state isn't a very fire prone or historically fire prone area, but as we've seen in the Gatlinburg fire several years ago and over the course of this past fall, the northern part of the state and that Ridge Valley, more mountainous areas, they are just as susceptible to fires on the landscape as the more traditionally known Pine Barrens area of New Jersey. Um, although the Pine Barrens area of the state in Burlington, Ocean, Atlantic, Camden, and Cape May and Cumberland counties, uh, they definitely house the greater amount of these larger fires, but fire has been a large part of the landscape for decades, if not centuries. Go ahead and next slide, please. So here's a depiction or slide of major wildfire frequency across the state over the course of the last 5 years. So areas where there's a lighter color, those are where you had fires 100 acres or greater more than five times or more. And you see the color-coded scale there, 4, 3, 2, 1. So fires, large fires are, as we stated in the last slide, more frequent in the Pine Barrens. You can see it more visually here than you could on that other slide because this is more of a frequency map from 2024 to back to 1924. And that Ocean County, Burlington County, Atlantic County, those are really the epicenters of where these major wildfires have occurred traditionally in the past. And that is a main result of the type of fuels that are there, being that pine barrens, pitch pine, shortleaf pine, scrub oak forest. The deciduous forests do carry fire and are fire prone too, but not to the same frequency as the fuels that are located in those Pine Barrens areas. Go ahead and next slide, please. So let's talk about and explore the wildfire risk in New Jersey. So several years ago, I think it was going on maybe it's 4 or 5 years ago, we embarked, or maybe 6 years ago, we embarked on a project to determine a fire risk across the state, and that project has been launched. And it's called the Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal, the New Jersey WRAP. It's a really good portal that we have housed on our website, and it gives a lot of good information that talks about fire risk and susceptibility to the different areas across the state, not just one specific area, but statewide. So this first slide that we're looking at as a product from that WRAP, which I believe Joe will be talking about again later in probably more detail. The burn probability is that a specific geographic location will experience a wildland fire during a specified time period of 1 year. These estimates of burn probability were generated from large wildfire simulations. So we had the top scientist modeler in the country run numerous models and runs of those models on the burn probability and some of these other products that we had too, to develop this WRAP. And what you can see here is where you would expect the central and southern part of the state is where that burn probability is much higher. So if you see the scale at the bottom, the lighter the color, the less of the burn probability. The darker the color, the greater that burn probability. And yes, the Pine Barrens are like that redder, darker spot. But if you look to the north, they're just as susceptible, and there's a great probability up there as well of having a fire. Go ahead and next slide, please. So one of the products that came out of this WRAP was Structure Exposure Score, SES. So this combines the wildfire likelihood or the burn probability and the consequence of represented by damage potential, which we'll be talking about damage potential in a second here as well. Assuming a home is present on a pixel. So a pixel is an area that's representative of a geographic area on that map. It's one of the ways they use to run these models to help visualize what's going on the ground. The SES is analogous to that risk to potential structures data set, but includes an ember load. So embers, everybody's like, probably, if you're not familiar what an ember is, you've seen a million of them on the TV and the news the last couple of weeks with these California fires. Every video that is being shown is showing these little sparks, red glowing sparks coming from the main body of the fire. These are what we call embers, and they carry fire and start new fires, smaller fires ahead of the fire and around that fire. So each of these SES classes from 1 to 10 is 1.5 times higher exposure to wildfire than the previous class. So there's a greater chance of these embers being exposing themselves to structures the darker that color is, by 1.5 times for each of these classes. So again, if you look in the center part of the state here, it is that darker color, that Pine Barrens, the fuels in the Pine Barrens, as we talked about, with the pitch pine, the scrub oaks, the shortleaf pine. Those fuels tend to what we call crown out. That means that the fire goes from the surface of the ground into the canopies of the trees and consumes those canopies. When it consumes those canopies, it tends to have a more incomplete combustion, and it gets so superheated and aggravated that it lofts chunks of tree bark and tree needles and tree cones into the atmosphere, and those are those embers that you see in those nighttime videos, polluting themselves across the landscape in front of the fire. Go ahead and next slide, please. So the next slide we have here is the damage potential, which represents that potential consequences of fire to a home at a given location if that fire were to occur and if a home were located there. This damage potential incorporates that ember load that we were just talking about and the conditional risk to the potential structures as generated measures of the potential loss to homes. So this is kind of combining these two different pieces. And as one imagines, as we are probably all aware of, or that are from New Jersey and aware of the Pine Barrens, again, the Pine Barrens is that bullseye for the state for that damage potential. But if you do look to the north, there is some darker shades there, and one of those reasons why you have some of those darker shades there, even though you don't have that same pitch pine forest there, is you have steep slopes where fire will run up very quickly, and a lot of embers from the leaf litter and some of the brush that is evident on those sites will expose an ember load to the structures in those areas too. Just not to the same magnitude as what you would see down in the central and southern part of the state. Go ahead, next slide, please. So that conditional ember production. So on the picture on the right there, that's exactly what I was talking about. It's the same thing you were seeing on all these videos in California last week or two. All those little red orange pieces are embers. Those are all pieces of tree, a shrub, or grass from a conflagration that get emitted into the atmosphere and get deposited and in the fire's path and ahead of the fire's path, depending on the conditions that are suitable at that time. Depending on the receptibility of those fuels, those embers can start new fires ahead of that larger fire and continue to make that large fire grow rapidly, continuously, until it runs out of fuels. So this data set indicates where those embers are originating when fires occur, so they would be targeted. I think you went backwards on me, Joe. So again, if you saw that slide before, it had those darker colors in the Pine Barrens area, and again, that's where that pitch pine, those fuels are really conducive, creating a lot of ember production. So how do we deal with this risk? So the New Jersey Forest Fire Service was created at the recommendation of Gifford Pinchot back in the early 1900s. He came across and realized that New Jersey had such a potential for these wildfires, and it had been evident that fires had been on that landscape from early settlers and the records with the Native American population that was here, the Lenape, that there's a real problem here in New Jersey, and that we needed to create a fire agency that could deal with this statewide. So in 1906, the New Jersey Forest Fire Service was born, and under under the New Jersey Forest Fire Service, we are developed or broken up into 3 different geographical areas. The northern part of the state, which is Division A, is north of the Raritan River. The Division B, which is the central part of the state, which encompasses the heart of the Pinelands, is between the Raritan and the Molucca rivers. And then Division C breaks up the southern part of the state south of the Molucca River. Each of these divisions are broken into subsections, what we call sections. So there's 8 in the north, 10 in the central area, and 11 in the south. Those sections are overseen by section forest fire wardens who are responsible for responding to any non-structural wildfire in the state within their primary service areas. Those section fire wardens are also responsible for training their crews and also training the volunteer fire department crews that also help assist during these events. So if you look at that map, there's the lighter color, and then you can see the green part where the Pinelands is, and there's like this kind of a tan color. That tan color is what we call our secondary service area. And that kind of lines around New York, where the metropolitan areas are, and around Philadelphia and along the Delaware River. These are areas that aren't as fire prone and don't have these continuous blocks of wildland fuels as you see in the rest of the state, where you see on that map we have the fire towers. So there's 21 fire towers across the state. And these fire towers are how we detect fires in the state. So fires can be dispatched from a 911 system. When these fires are in remote areas, they're not always caught by passerbys calling their cell phone to 911 to say, "Hey, I see a fire." Sometimes you're in remote spots, and the fire towers are able to what we call triangulate the position of these fires and dispatch those resources. So one fire tower will spot a fire, and then he'll take an azimuth, and then he'll radio out to the rest of the fire towers in the area and say, "I've got a fire at this degree," and the other fire towers will start looking in that area, and they'll look for that smoke. When they find that smoke, they give an azimuth. When they pull those two lines on a map with those two azimuths, where those lines cross is where that fire is potentially at. So at that point, those forest fire observers that man those fire towers um, contact the section forest fire wardens and sometimes the local county dispatches to alert them that, hey, we got a fire over here. Let's get some resources. Now, those fire observers do more than just spot those towers. They actually serve as, dispatches for our fire on the ground firefighters as well. So when a fire is detected, that section fire warden shows up on scene. He sees it and he's like, "All right, I'm going to need X amount of resources." He lets that fire observer know, and that fire observer is able to call up additional trucks, engines, and bulldozers, or our hand crews as needed, or additional structural support or water tenders from some of the local fire companies. So that's kind of how we deal as far as with the response structure and how we operate. Go ahead, next slide, please. So units respond anywhere where needed. So there was that area that I talked about being the primary service area. So that's where our main focus is. But when there are fires, wildfires that fall outside of that primary service area and that secondary area, we will respond to those areas as well. But we don't respond to those until we are called upon. So when the local officials come to the realization that they're not able to contain that fire by themselves and they need help, and may not have the resources like we do, bulldozers, the hand crews. They may not have the same ability to fight those fires, to contain some of them depending on where they're at. They'll call us up and we'll assist them to contain and control those fires. Next slide, please. So here's a slide of some of the stats from 2024. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the causes and some of the acreages that are built into those causes. So a lot of people always ask the question, does lightning cause the fires? Is that our main cause? Lightning is one of the smallest causes of fire across New Jersey. It's probably it's definitely less than 1% of the fires that are started across the state. This past year, we had 4 lightning strike fires that happened that consumed 1 acre. The vast majority of all of our fires are what we call anthropogenic. They are caused by humans in some shape or form, whether that be intentional or unintentional, equipment malfunctions, people not realizing when they dump their ashes out in the woods and it's dry out, that the ashes catch because they weren't cold, catch fires in the woods. There's a whole list of them. Some of the ones you see here: campfires, smokers, debris burning, incendiary, equipment, railroad, children. Back in the day, before video games and cell phones were real big, those children fires were much higher than 60 a year, but PlayStations and cell phones are really good fire prevention for us. And they've actually helped keep some of those numbers down over the last probably 10, 15 years from what they were prior to that, maybe even the last 20 years. So as you can see on the right-hand side, it depicts the number of fires we had last year. So we had 1,440 fires across the state, 544 in the northern part of the state, 410 in the central, and 486 in the southern part of the state. And then also another 784 other incidents that we responded to across the state. And that could be like search and rescues, responding to storm damage, assisting other public agencies, or investigating smoke scares. So of those 1,440 acres fires, that consumed around 12,000 acres over this past year on the landscape. The next thing that you see here on this summary is RXB acres. So what is RXB? When you go to the doctor and you get a prescription, it's an RX pad, right? That's what they put your prescription on. Well, we refer to prescribed fire as RXB. So that's what that acronym means there. So last year we conducted over 15,000 acres of prescribed fire on the landscape. 1/3 of that was in grass areas. And then if you see on the RXB acres owners, 2/3 of that acres that was treated was on state open space, whether it be fish and wildlife or parks and forestry, like our state forest or state parks. 400 or 4,841 acres of that was completed on private lands, other county, other municipal, nonprofit group lands. Next slide, please. So where were all those 1,440 fires last year? Well, this map right here is a very good indication of where those wildfires are and how big they were. So the larger the circle there, the greater the fire size. So the bigger circle represents fires that were 100 acres or greater. The next bigger circle was 80 acres, 50 acres, 30 acres, and less than 1 acre. And you can see that pretty much across the landscape, at least in the primary service area, that probably every municipality was represented within the state having wildfires located in it. You can see where all these other responses were, other incidents as well. Again, a good scatter across the state. But remember we talked about in that last slide or the slide before about the primary and secondary service areas. So the secondary service areas are the areas that are grayed out in the state here. So along New York City and then along the Philadelphia and the Delaware there. And you can see these are some of the fires that we were called in to help assist the locals because it wasn't our primary area, but it was secondary and they needed help to help control these fires. And some of these fires, got to 50 acres or larger in some cases. Next slide, please. So wildfire ignitions and density. This is the last 5 years of where those ignitions densities are and were, and they're weighted by size. So again, you see the heart of the Pine Barrens is where a lot of this action's happening. But if you look up in the northern part of the state, there's a little noise up there, isn't there? And a lot of people wouldn't have realized that the northern part of the state had an ignition problem, but there is quite a few ignitions that are occurring in the northern part of the state as well. Next slide, please. So wildfire trends in New Jersey. The number of wildfires from 2013 to 2024. So the low point was in 2018 and our high point was this past year, right? So you can see that gradual progression. So in 2013, we were kind of steady around that 900,000 acres or so. And then we kind of dipped off in 2017, 18, and then we started to gradually increase over the course of like, I guess the next 6 or 7 years to the point where we are today. So some of these slower years that you're seeing, 2018, 2017, ask yourself, what may have been the reason why there were so few fires? Well, the same reason why some of these fires in California are so large right now, the weather. The weather influences the receptiveness of the forest fuels on the landscape. And when you have receptive fuels on that landscape, when you have ignition sources, potentials, they're more likely to catch fire and create a wildfire. If it's wet enough, it's going to reduce the amount of ignitions that you can have on that landscape. So 2018 is a prime example, 17, really wet years, quiet years for incident response for wildfires for the state. And then as you see, we get into this past year, 1,440 fires. We went through a historic drought from starting in probably mid-August, at least in the southern part of the state. From August 15th until I think mid-November, I had 0.68 inches of rain, which is well below where we should have been. We should have had inches of rain in that time frame. And that lack of rain helped create ripe conditions where we had numerous days of red flag days. So a lot of you probably noticed that you saw lots of red flag alerts popping up on your phone more and more. And it wasn't just in the spring, it was in the fall this year too. Next slide, please. So ignition frequency, we already hit that slide. That is like a repeat. So next slide, please. So statewide prescribed fire acres treated. So remember I was talking about 18 being a slow year for wildfires? Well, it was a slow year for prescribed fire too. You see it highlighted in orange there. And again, Mother Nature dictates when we can actually put fire on the ground, prescribed fire. We can't put fire on the ground when the fuels are too wet and too moist, because one of the things that's created from using prescribed fire is that smoke. Well, smoke is water vapor. So the wetter the fuels are, the more vapor, water vapors is going to be released, and the more particulates are going to be released in the atmosphere. So we try to mitigate those days of burning when it's too wet. Certain fuels burn a little better when it's wetter than others, like pine needles. They will dry out a lot faster than, say, a fuel bed of oak leaves that are latent across the landscape. So in 2018, a wet year, as we saw with the wildfire activity, we also see it with prescribed fire, because we were just getting so much rain that we weren't able to get a lot of fire on the ground to treat acres. 2019, we peaked out 28,000 across the state, really good year. And this year, we were in a drought in the fall, but leading up to the fall and into early summer, we were wetter than I'm sure that I know what I had. I had a lot of water coming out of my sump pump in my basement from the first part of the year up until like June. And I imagine a lot of you people also had that same thing happening. There was water everywhere. And then the spigot turned off, and then we went into a drought. So we were fortunate to get at least 15,000 acres of prescribed fire on the ground this year. Because some of those rain events were, 3-4 inch rain events at a time. So it gave us an opportunity to squeak in some fire treatments on the landscape, do that. So why do we prescribe fire? Well, we use prescribed fire to strategically place areas that are burned out that we can use to help hold wildfires when they occur. So it's safer for our firefighters to attack and try to control those fires if they're working in areas that have been burned with prescribed fire prior to the fire coming through. Areas that haven't seen prescribed fire and that are what we call like virgin forests, that have a lot of, not virgin forest, but significant fuel loads, they're much more difficult to contain and control than areas that have been prescribed with fire. Next. So here's a slide of the drought for this year. This was updated in January 9th. So the extreme and severe drought has mitigated a little bit southward. So the northern part of the state isn't quite as affected, but it's still in that moderate drought. The forecasts are, if we don't continue to get significant precipitation and catch up with our indices, that we're probably going to run into a very similar fire season as we saw in the fall. It's probably going to tail off into the spring and potentially create a problem for us if we don't get significant rainfall to catch up those indices. And as you can see, it's basically Ocean County, Burlington County, Atlantic County, Cumberland, and Cape May are the primary targeted areas for that extreme drought. And that's our Pinelands core right there, part of the state. So it would be really good for us to see a lot more rainfall moving forward. Next slide, please. So I was talking about that fire occurrence in the fall this year. So this is like the number of fires that happened from October 1st to the present. So that was like the end of the year. So October 1st to December 31st. We had significant amount of fires during that time frame. We normally have a fall fire season. It's usually not as as long as this one by any stretch, and the fire activity is nowhere near what it's been. So the graph that you see there, the blue bars are the average number of fires that have occurred by month over from 2014 until the current month, and the yellow bars are representing what this year's stats were. So as you can see, a little slow in the beginning, like we were talking about, a lot of rain, kind of, keeping around that average. We get to April below average, and that's typically one of our fire season months. April, May are our prime months, well below average because we had so much rain going on. And then in June, we get a little blip up there. And then as you see, we get into like June, August, and then August is when the rain spigot really turned off. And you can see the number. We doubled the average in September. In October, we were just off the charts. We ran fire after fire after fire from October through November until we finally got significant precipitation. Next slide. So one of the things that we had done by the U.S. Forest Service, they assist us creating a rapid assessment for New Jersey because we were in a historic drought. We've seen KBI, what we call Keith Byram Drought indices. The maximum range is 800, and we were just below 800. So that means that we were like in that first 8 inches of the soil, 800 is the max. The first 7 inches of that soil were completely like drought. Like it was really, really dry. And that affects the vegetation that's on top of that's growing there. And when that vegetation is stressed that much, they don't have that same fuel moisture as they normally do. And when fire ignitions, sparks or embers from some of those causes we talked about before get into those fuels, they're very receptive, and their ability to spread rapidly and fire behavior was just off the charts from what we've seen in the past. So one of a couple of the key things that they talked about in this rapid assessment finds and recommendations was, augmentation of initial attack resources will likely be required. So what they're saying is you're not going to be able to just put these fires out like you did in the past. You're going to need extra resources, and it's going to take a lot longer period of time to do that. Don't expect any of the fires to be routine. Be prepared to utilize indirect tactics. So David's going to talk about a lot of these fires not being routine from what we're used to seeing. And the last thing I'll point out on this slide is the effects of long-term drought coupled by below normal winter 2024 precipitation could result in significantly elevated wildfire risks in the spring of 2025. So they said that initially during this is November that they did this. They said if we didn't get significant rainfall, that it's going to be a problem for us come spring fire season. So if we don't get that significant rainfall to help catch these indices up, it could be a long spring as well. Next slide, Joe. So this is the last slide I'm going to touch on. I'm going to let David take it over from here. But the one thing that I want to point out here is the days to 100% containment, the column on the right there. So as you see, the date started as we were like in our early part of the season. So these are major wildfires that occurred in New Jersey. We had 12 major wildfires that consumed 100 acres or greater. The first 4 of these fires going into September, it was 2 days containment. So it was just starting to take hold. By the time we got into late October, it took 25 days for the industrial parkway to hit 100% containment, 19 days, 20 days, 15 days. So what this is this is telling us that because of these really dry drought conditions, the firefighters had to spend significantly more time and resources to try to contain these fires because they keep smoldering into the ground, and the fuels were just so receptive and they continually wanted to burn. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David.
Good evening, everybody. My name's David Ackey, and stated earlier, I'm a supervising forest fire warden. I work out of the state headquarters in Trenton, and I am responsible for the operations side of what we do as an agency. So basically, the operations is It's the suppression part of, extinguishing fires and sending personnel and equipment to respond to different incidents throughout the state. So, as everybody knows, coming off a very trying year, 1,440 wildfires, 12,000 acres burned, another 785 incidents, non-wildfire incidents that were responded to. I have to apologize in advance for my voice. I'm not feeling the greatest right now. So, but yeah, so just kind of, going back to the one slide, the state's broken down into 3 geographic areas. Division A being the north region, Division B being the central region, Division C being the southern region. Section fire wardens being assigned, full-time fire wardens being assigned to those little individual subsections in the state. And then a large amount of apparatus and part-time firefighters that we utilize on a day-to-day basis. So most folks don't realize that the New Jersey Forest Fire Service is the largest fire department in the state of New Jersey. Like I said, we have about 80 full-time staff that covers our fire wardens, our fire observers, our maintenance staff, and our clerical staff. We also have an aviation facility, aviation program. We actually own 2 functioning airports. One in North Jersey, Aeroflex. Then we have Coyle Field in Division B that houses our fixed wing and our rotorcraft. So 80 full-time employees, 1,400 part-time employees. We have about 100 Type 6 engines. They're those little, people call them power wagons, brush trucks, but 100 Type 6 engines, about 25 tractor plow units. They're the bulldozers with the plow on the back. And we also have 6 helicopters, 4 fixed wing aircraft, pardon me, 4 fixed wing aircraft that we own. And then we also have contract aviation. So we use contract vendors for the planes to drop the water on the fires. And that's basically, we typically staff them, the contract aviation during the spring. They're typically on for about 35 to 40 days in the spring. And then the remainder of the year, they're on what's known as a call when needed contract. So as fire potential is elevated, we have the ability to bring that aviation asset on duty. So we respond to various amount of incidents. Obviously, wildfires are our #1 priority, but we also do a lot of search and rescue, a lot of storm damage in these communities. As we see, the weather events have become more severe, whether it be drought or severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, whatever it might be. We have the ability to send saw crews, bulldozers, whatever municipalities might need or county or state agencies might need assistance in. We can render assistance, that way. So 12 major fires this year. As Jeremy stated before, the containment time, time that we get lines around them and we feel that the fire is secure. If you see on that side, county line, that was 1 day. The fire had big control lines around it. We were coming off a fairly wet spring or very wet spring. So once the main body of fire was knocked down, we were able to get that contained pretty fast. Tea-Time Hill, 7 days. Still coming off of, we weren't quite in a drought yet. That fire was in a fairly remote area on the Wharton State Forest. So it took a little while longer to get control lines and get the lines secure, but 7 days. But I will note that fire started on July 4th and was actively burning interior till we received significant rainfall in November. So just because the fire was not, it's contained, it's not out. So we actually had to have resources monitoring that on the ground and the air for several months. The canopy, you know, what we call the duff, the turf would burn underground, that organic fuel. The needle cast would fall down, it would hit a hot area, flare back up, and would start open burning again. So August, September, October, November, basically 5 months that we had to staff that incident with folks. Whippoorwill fire was in Bass River, Burlington County. So that was much, 7 days. It wasn't very long duration. We're able to get control lines around that pretty quick. And, and then can you go back to the first slide, Joe? And then, as you see, when we start getting further into the fall, the days, Fisher's Pit was right there on the cusp when things really started getting dry. That was in like a reclamation gravel pit. So the fuels didn't really have a chance to establish that real good organic material, the duff and the turf to burn. So containment on that really didn't take too long. And then when you see us get into the fall from the industrial all the way down, the only sidebar to that would be the Cannonball 3 fire. And that was actually because that fire, where that fire has occurred, there's been a couple fires there in the last couple of years. So the organic matter has been dwindled down from the fire frequency there. But going, industrial, that was more of a urban area, and it was Phragmites and more lower swamp area. So we were able to, we had to have folks monitoring that because we weren't able to get equipment everywhere. The Halloween fire in Cumberland County, very remote area, not able to get equipment. I think roughly several miles of hose that we laid on that fire and had to have folks staff it and pump on a daily basis. Craigmere Lookout, that was northern New Jersey. Interface fire, same thing, a lot of snags, a lot of duff, so 20 days. So all these, that's when we're staffing these fires with a significant amount of people, so they're contained. So it stretched our resources pretty thin throughout the fall. And there was a question about learning, and in the beginning when this first started, there was about a 2-week stretch there from the 26th to the 8th of November, 26th of October to the 8th of November, where we were just moving resources statewide from Cape May to High Point and everywhere in between to deal with these fires. And, we were doing daily shifts, 12-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, which is a common occurrence. But we typically have to do that for 2 or 3 days, and then we're in pretty good shape. And so the one learning experience from this, particularly this fall, was there when we got towards the end of that, is we were mobilizing resources and we were keeping them in place for like a 5-day commitment. So we didn't have folks traveling and putting in those gigantic hours. New Jersey's not the biggest state, but to get from Atlantic County to say Sussex County or Warren County to 100, takes quite a bit of time due to traffic. So, a 12-hour shift when you add 2.5 or 3 hours driving each way turns into 17 or 18 hours a day, and we didn't want that drain on our staff. So we were mobilizing resources and staff and keeping them in place for about a 4 or 5 day commitment. So that was one of the lessons that we learned there towards the end. But yeah, Joe, if you could just bounce through the slides and we'll kind of just hit. So yeah, the Whippoorwill fire, that was Bass River Township in Burlington County, right on the border of Burlington and Ocean. That was actually on the Warren Grove Gunnery Range. Fisher's Pit was in Ocean County. Let me bounce through, Joe. Next one. Industrial was in Essex County, And sorry about that. And that fire, every fire department in Essex County was dispatched to that incident. It was right on the fringes of our primary response and secondary response areas. So basically a very right on the edge of where wildland and urban come together. So we closed some shopping malls and some industrial parks for about a 24-hour period while we contained that wildfire. Go ahead, Joe. The Halloween wildfire was named because it occurred on Halloween. That was the one down in Cumberland County. You said, Joe, you've spent quite a bit of time there pumping and all, but it was, several miles of hose lays with portable pumps and snag crews, sawyers going in and felling trees ahead of the folks going into work because the root systems were so jeopardized from the drought and the turf burning that the trees were falling constantly. So we had to go in and mitigate a lot of those hazards. Go ahead, Joe. Craig Muir Lookout, Rockaway, Morris County, 211 acres, big urban interface fire. Fire came down off the mountains into the wildland urban interface. A lot of structure protection. We had firefighters from Newark City were there doing structure protection for us. Had resources from all over the state on that incident, and luckily no structure damage, and we're able to get that contained. Shotgun fire in Ocean County, another wildland urban interface incident. A lot of cooperation between our agency and the local cooperators, police departments, EMS, local fire departments, state police, DOT, county DOT. There's a lot of moving parts when we evacuate and do these road closures. So there's a lot of coordination that goes on between our agency and our cooperators. And we practice this like this time of year. We're slow. We're training and we're making these core relationships with our cooperators. So when incidents like this occur, that everything seems to move flawlessly. So, and knock on wood, thank God, all this stuff is, due to repetition and practice, we've become pretty good at mobilizing resources, various types of resources in a short amount of time. Bethany Run wildfire, another big urban interface incident. At one point in time, there was like 95 structures threatened, 2 counties. It was right on the border of Burlington and Camden counties. So a lot of coordination amongst the different county resources and our agency. But once again, no structures damaged. Cannonball 3, another urban interface fire. Fire came out of a remote area and burnt into this townhome complex. We were able to contain that with no structures damaged. Okay, Joe. And then a Jennings Creek wildfire was over 5,000 acres and burnt in New Jersey and New York. So a lot of collaboration with our partners to the north on suppressing the fire and making sure that everything was working seamlessly across state boundaries. We would send resources to their briefings in the morning. They would send folks to our briefings. A lot of communication throughout the day to make sure that everything that we were doing was being transparent across state lines. Unfortunately, a young man lost his life on this wildfire. It was an incident, and so not a very good outcome, but it's a very dangerous job. So, and then the Jennings Creek, we hand crews. We had folks on this fire from down south in central New Jersey. We shipped folks up there, and they spent about a week digging hand line and falling trees and doing everything we needed to do. We sent some folks over to New York to help them out as well. So yeah, trying fall. I think we learned quite a bit about the capacity of our agency and the ability to move resources statewide. And there is the ability to call in out-of-state resources. We utilize some of our federal partners. There are some U.S. Fish and Wildlife and National Park Service engines and crews that are actually stationed in New Jersey or right across the river in Pennsylvania. We were able to use them. We were able to utilize the state police incident management team to help out with some logistical support. So yeah, very busy fall. And like Jeremy stated, if we don't get some more precip, the spring's going to be very interesting. So with that, I'll pass it along to Joe.
Thank you, David. My name's Joe Battersby. I'm the outreach coordinator for New Jersey Forest Fire Service located in Trenton, New Jersey. I also do wildfire prevention and preparedness, and I also oversee some of our federal grant dollars. So each year as wildfires burn across the country, Congress appropriates funds through the federal government to the U.S. Forest Service and other agencies. Some of that money gets passed down to the New Jersey Forest Fire Service, and we direct a lot of those funds towards New Jersey's communities at risk. So I'm going to talk real briefly about some of what we do as far as education with New Jersey's residents, and some of our preparedness planning, which includes community wildfire protection plans. We also are a sponsor and oversee a program called FireWise USA, and then another program called Ready, Set, Go. And then I'll briefly go over some of the grant opportunities that are tied to each of these programs. So I didn't realize Jeremy had this same slide, and he beat it up pretty good, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But when talking about preventing wildfires, this is kind of where we start. This is not all the wildfire causes. This is some of the leading causes in New Jersey. And as Jeremy mentioned, the only natural cause of wildfire in New Jersey is lightning. Going back over the last couple of years, we did see a little uptick in lightning. We had a major fire in 2023. That was a lightning cause, but 99% of our fires are caused by people. Also, I think that little uptick in lightning is probably detection. The technology to detect these lightning starts has gotten quite a bit better, which does help us as far as doing an investigation and locating fires. So I'd be remiss to talk about wildfire prevention without talking about Smokey Bear. Smokey's been around forever. And his message, "Only you can prevent wildfires," is renowned not only in the United States, but that message is recognizable in different parts of the globe even. So Smokey really came to fruition in the 1950s, 1960s, and 70s. Some of the large conflagrations in the western states and in the Northeast, Smokey became very popular. So in 1952, the Smokey Bear Act was passed. And the reason for me that's important is some of the monies that the Forest Fire Service does get for prevention programming actually comes from a licensing royalty for Smokey Bear. So say, for example, you go to Target and you buy a Smokey Bear shirt, 15% of that royalty goes back into wildfire prevention programming across the United States. So the New Jersey Forest Fire Service uses Smokey. If requested, we will bring Smokey in costume out to an event. We do a lot of parades. We do I&E in schools. Pretty much anywhere we're requested, we'll take Smokey. And Forest Fire Service, we're able to use his likeness. We have a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Forest Service. Smokey Bear is administered by the U.S. Forest Service, the National Association of State Foresters, and the U.S. Ag Council. statewide, Jeremy showed the graphic that kind of showed our division. So we've got guys and girls north to south that cover Cape May all the way to High Point. We also have a requirement for those section forest fire wardens where they have to live where they work. So, for example, if you are in Southern Division C5, you have to live in your section in C5. And beyond wildfire, swift wildfire protection, and that's the root explanation of that requirement is in the middle of the night, we need to be able to dispatch resources quick. Really, the only way to do that is for them to have their fire truck and leave from their location. It also provides opportunity with wildfire prevention and messaging. Our fire wardens, they live where they work. They develop relationships in their community and their schools with other emergency management departments, police, local fire, politicians across the board. So in that way, New Jersey Forest Fire Service is kind of unique. A lot of the states in the Northeast especially don't have that sort of setup. And I think that is a reason we're so successful in some of the wildfire prevention we do. We do about 400 educational events a year. And again, Smokey's message, everybody knows only you. Smokey's message from 1947 to 2001 was only you can prevent forest fires. In 2001, that message changed to only you can prevent wildfires. And the reason behind that is not all fire is bad fire. And Jeremy kind of alluded to the fact that New Jersey does and has a pretty robust prescribed burn program. So that message was changed in 2001. A lot of Western states don't use Smokey Bear's likeness as much because of that. That all fires are bad fires, and it is not necessarily true. So as far as preparedness in New Jersey, New Jersey Forest Fire Service also develop comprehensive plans, wildfire plans. And the way we do it in New Jersey, and it's different from state to state and region to region, but we team up with local townships. So we'll team up with a local township and write a cross-jurisdictional plan for that specific township. That plan has an assessment associated with it, and then we sit down with stakeholders in that township municipality, assess the risk, and then we come up with ways we can reduce that risk. So currently we have about 46 CWPPs statewide. Most of those CWPPs are concentrated where the wildfire risk is. Jeremy talked about northwestern New Jersey and the New Jersey Pinelands, and that's where we target most of our community wildfire protection plans. Also in this graphic, so the purple is the CWPPs. Also, and I'll get into it in a second, the yellow is Firewise communities in New Jersey. So community wildfire protection plans have been around for about 15 years. In the bipartisan infrastructure law, projects in approved CWPPs are currently being funded. So there's a program called Community Wildfire Defense Grant. It targets wildfire risk, low income, and severe disaster areas for basically wildfire fuels reduction projects. We have a couple communities in New Jersey that qualified and are receiving grant funds to reduce fuel loading in their communities. The program's pretty competitive. It's $1 billion across the U.S. that was broken up over 5 years. We're currently in year 3 of it. There is an open enrollment going on right now for CWDG. And if anybody was interested in applying for CWDG, you can reach out to me or your local township, especially if there is a current community wildfire protection plan in place. So CWPPs are kind of a plan to action. So we, the Forest Fire Service, will sit down with the municipality or township and help assess risks. and kind of get the stakeholders together in that township. It might be large landowners, it might be OEM officials, it might be the Turnpike Authority, depending on what section of the state it's in. So what this plan does is basically lay out that assessment and boils it down to prioritize wildfire risk reduction actions in there. It's really a great way for us to collaborate with partners. It is cross-jurisdictional. So for example, it crosses land ownerships. It could include private property. It could include state property, county property, municipal property. So anything within that township bounds. And then also the CWPP is a way to maintain some of those practices that are implemented. So for example, fuels reduction projects, where say we do brush mowing around a community, we'll put maintenance in that, so that project isn't forgotten about. So some other examples of actions in CWPPs: fire breaks and fuel break installation, prescribed fire RXB, mechanical thinning, road and roadside mowing, ladder fuel reduction. Ladder fuels being most fires, or almost all fires, start on the ground and then they climb up from ignition points where leaves or pine needles are burning, climb up into the brush layer, climb up, ladder themselves a little bit further up into taller brush and lower branches of trees, and then into treetops where it's a crown fire. So ladder fuel reduction is basically removing the ladder where a fire can jump from the ground up into the forest canopy, where it's at which point it's very difficult for us to control. CWPPs can also include firewise practices, and some of the preparedness examples might include installation of hydrants, rules or ordinances within that township, and then some outreach and education. The other program we've been involved with for at least 15 years, I think we're closer to 20 years now, is Firewise USA. Firewise USA was kind of born out of residents taking wildfire risk actions upon themselves. It was born out of Colorado in the early 2000s. They were in a severe drought. Residents got tired of year after year of evacuations, homes burnt. So they started to take matters in their own hands and developed a curriculum and kind of a framework for wildfire risk reduction actions. The U.S. Forest Service, Department of Interior helped sponsor this. The program primary sponsor is NFPA, it's the National Fire Protection Association, who also sets code enforcement regulations across many states. So New Jersey Forest Fire Service is the sponsor of this. And why Firewise? Jeremy mentioned 2017, 2018, 2019. And as far as wildfire prevention and preparedness, it's really tough. In this realm, you feel like you're preaching to the choir, or you're preaching to people asleep on the pews. And in areas or times when we have record rainfall, it's difficult to vocalize the wildfire risk in some of these areas. When it's raining and wildfires aren't on the evening news, it's hard to get people to move towards action. But why Firewise? 56% of all homes in New Jersey are in the wildland urban interface, where the forested area and the urban area meet. Many parts of New Jersey, especially the New Jersey Pinelands, is a major threat and a major, what we call WUI area for us. A lot of the building in the 1990s and 2000 and even the 2010 were built around the periphery of the Pinelands because of building regulations. So you have this dense forest fuel, this volatile fuel with elevated fire behavior, and you have houses built next to it. And in most cases, they're communities that range anywhere from hundreds to thousands of homes. So over the past 20 years, the program Firewise has really grown in New Jersey. There's currently 26 active Firewise communities that represent about 30,000 residents. And Firewise, just like the motto and this logo says, it's residents reducing wildfire risk. The New Jersey Forest Fire Service we're pretty good. We've been around since 1906 and operating on state lands and in the forested areas. What gets very difficult and complex for us is when we have these interface fires. They're very complex because there's multiple layers of uh, um, response from state level to county level to local. We have residents involved. So anything we can do to persuade community and community residents to help take on their wildfire risk, we'll do anything in our power to promote that. Firewise, one of the requirements to Firewise is volunteerism. So in 2024, there was about 13,000 volunteer hours across these 26 communities. And Firewise in New Jersey is kind of built to where these communities, a lot of them built around HOAs, are putting real dollars into their community. So the New Jersey Forest Fire Service, through wildfire risk reduction or federal grants, we will provide sub grants to Firewise communities. Generally, they're anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 per community per year, and that's to do wildfire risk and educational actions. That has leveraged real dollars, and in 2024 alone, these communities spent a little over $1 million of their own money to reduce wildfire risk in their communities. And the actual money that was spent since 2017 on wildfire risk reduction actions is a little over $5 million. So how do you become Firewise? Generally, the way it works is somebody has a fire in their backyard and then tries to figure out what to do about it. In some cases, the New Jersey Forest Fire Service will approach communities and try to gain interest into the program, but it's got 6 steps. 1 is developing a Firewise committee. 2, it's doing a wildfire risk assessment for your community. 3, it's developing a action plan to reduce that risk. Firewise also has a requirement of some sort of outreach or educational day or project, and then also maintaining your annual certification in the Firewise portal. And basically that's just tracking your accomplishments over the course of that calendar year. Usually talking to these communities, like I said, sometimes it's difficult to gain interest in wildfire protection. This year, we have people contacting us about the program. So you'll see that number of communities ebb and flow, where I'd imagine by this time next year, we probably have about 35 or 40 community Firewise communities in the state. So this is kind of usually what I lead with. The Northeast, what we call Region 9, the 20 Northeast states, anywhere from Missouri and Iowa to Maine. If you look at kind of the risk assessment across all those states, New Jersey has more wildfire risk than most states. Jeremy talked about the New Jersey Pinelands, and again, most of our Firewise communities are around the Pinelands. Restrictions to building in the Pinelands have kind of pushed development around the Pinelands, which has become a problem for the New Jersey Forest Fire Service. So Firewise in action, there's practices associated with Firewise, and a lot of it can be broken up into 2 buckets. One, there's forest fuel reduction. That's New Jersey Forest Fire Service's common goal in partnering with these communities. But there's also things residents can do in and around their houses. And this gives us the framework and a platform to engage those communities with the local fire department, police department, and do some real risk reduction measures. For example, some things you could do around your house which is called home hardening, would be remove vegetation, especially flammable vegetation around your house. There's certain species, and we can provide a list of, we call it fires wise landscaping species, that are less volatile and less combustible, that can be planted in place of those other plants. Soffits, it's Jeremy talked about embers. 9 out of 10 fires destroyed in a wildfire are not destroyed by the flaming fire front. You'd think that the enormous flaming wildfire front that slams into these communities would be the major cause of destruction of these homes, but it's not. It's the embers. It's the embers that get in through your soffits. It's the embers that land in dry brush, maybe in a landscape planting, that get underneath your deck where that hasn't been cleaned out, in your gutters that has pine needles in it. That's how homes are destroyed. So in California this year, just like every year, fire scientists are going to go look and try to determine why certain houses survived wildfire and some didn't. Now, California, like David said, that is a different issue this year. That was a firestorm moving through, but most large wildfires, the homes that survive are because they are home hardened. So the other bucket here is the framework for the New Jersey Forest Fire Service to basically partner with these communities. So we'll go in, provide education, but we'll also provide fuels reduction monies, and we'll also provide some actual fuel reductions around the communities if we can. So for example, these pictures here are from a community that had structures burned in the 2007 Warren Grove fire. So the fire burned around 18,000 acres, burned to the community. The community was evacuated, burned structures in the community. Well, what happens in New Jersey pinelands forests over the course of 20 or so years? The forest grows back. And in this case, it actually grew back. The pine forest grew back denser than it probably originally was during the 2007 Warren Grove fire. So we identified this elevated wildfire risk, approached the community. Community became firewise. It was bordered by New Jersey Fish and Wildlife property, and we were able to put a fuel break because of participation firewise around the community. If the community had not been firewise, it would have been much more difficult for us to convince the residents it was a good idea to cut trees around their community. But the firewise committee basically did our legwork for us, educating the community. It's difficult to see here, but the fire break here, you see under Brighton at Barnegat, there's a fuel break, which is separate from a fire break. A fire break would be complete removal of all vegetation around the community. A fuel break is a reduction in forest fuels. So we reduced the forest fuels to the point where we feel comfortable we could protect those homes. Should a 2007 Warren Grove fire happen again, we'd have a fighting chance to protect the structures this time. And this is kind of a before and after, not exactly from the same spot, but from the same backyard of a house, what the forest fuels look like. On the left, you see, from David's standpoint, a nightmare on the back of homes. That fire is going to crown very quickly just because the dense vegetation and the ladder fuels. So we reduced the continuity of the fuels by providing the fuel break. And the result, I think, one, it works as far as a fuel break, but it also is aesthetically pleasing. And over the course of the last decade, we've really figured that out. If we can make things look nice, there's less objection in installing these fuel and fire breaks. Here's another community that we're currently partnering with, trying to do fuel reduction measures. And I bring this slide up again because Our primary lead with these Firewise communities is our section forest fire wardens. Again, they live in those areas, they develop relationships with these communities, and they develop friendships in these communities. So the Forest Fire Service, we're trusted by these communities, and we're also held our feet to the fire. If we say we're going to do something, we need to do it, because they know who to reach if we don't do it. Here's one example we usually provide, talking about wildfire embers. March 14th, 2021, a day, mid-March, super dry day. The winds were high, low humidity. A fire started on the west side of the Garden State Parkway near Lakewood Airport. The fire jumped the parkway, blown over the parkway, burned some structures down, and it burned into that wildland urban interface area that we're talking about. So this was the result of the fire. So you're kind of looking west. So the fire was coming east, and it burned towards these houses on the bottom of the screen. And again, most people think that most of the destruction, and there were some structures and sheds lost here. There was no residential structures lost, but most people would think that most of the destruction would be from that main flaming fire front. But when we went on site and took a look, and this is a block over, there was destruction there from embers. So you can see a shed, you can see a home that was partially burnt. You can see all these visible, just from the photo, spot fires. So this is where embers landed in receptive fuels and started new fires. We went there the couple days after. There was too many new additional fires to count, spot fires. So this is very difficult in situations like this, where this neighborhood might have been evacuated. There may be structure protection from the local fire department there, but in these situations, it's chaotic, and also everybody's looking at the main fire front. This was casting embers hundreds of yards from where the main fire front was and starting new fires. So as part of Firewise and as part of wildfire preparedness, we generally teach people about these different zones around the house. And one, home hardening, and we can provide some information to Andy on this, where people can take a little bit of a deeper dive. But you have the intermediate zone, the extended zone, and the immediate zone. So the immediate zone is the area directly around your house. And what can you do there? Well, you can clean vegetation. You can put screens on your soffits to prevent embers from entering. You can disconnect fencing from your home. A lot of times when wooden or vinyl siding starts to burn in a fire, anything that's connected to the home, that vinyl siding will connect to the home and burn the structure. So we usually, as part of this, like to preach 100 feet of defensible space. And what does that mean? If you can provide 100 feet of clear vegetation from your structure to their surrounding woodlands, you're in pretty good shape. And again, fire scientists over the past decade and 2 decades have kind of confirmed that number. 100 feet of defensible space from radiant heat will generally save a house, as long as wildfire embers are not entering that house. And I'm going to kind of skip through these slides real quick, just kind of talking about some of the grant opportunities. Again, the Forest Fire Service will provide grant opportunities for New Jersey's Firewise communities to carry out actions that are in their Firewise action plan. Jeremy kind of hit on the New Jersey WRAP, and I would say anybody interested in taking a deeper dive into some of these tools and resources around your homes, this NJFA, New Jersey Wildfire Risk Assessment, has some great resources to do that. You can also enter in the location of your home and do a risk assessment, an automated risk assessment, using some of the modeling that was completed. And then we also have some other additional resources for communities, some of them available from our website, njwildfire.org, nfpa.org with Firewise, and anybody interested in the community wildfire defense grants can reach out. I'm going to just list one last program that we partner with. It's called Ready, Set, Go, and it's really an evacuation program for those people that are in high wildfire risk areas. It might be worthwhile for people in these high risk areas to take a look at this. And basically, it's planning, it's getting ready to go, evacuate from an area, it's getting set. It's having everything you need, which might include prescription medications, phone numbers if your cell phone goes dead, areas to go if you need to take pets with you, and then the go. And a lot of times people put together go bags where you have everything you need in a bag. You can grab it and go if you are in one of these elevated wildfire risk areas where you may need to evacuate. And with that, I think we're going to hand it back to Andy and see if there's any questions.
All right. Hey guys, thank you, Joe, Dave, Jeremy. You guys did a super thorough job. So thanks for taking time ahead of time to prepare all this, prepare the slides. I think it was super valuable, and a lot of the questions that that were submitted before this meeting, most of them, I think you all kind of covered. So one question that I got in the chat a couple of times was people have asked about kind of the plants that maybe if there's a list of plants that are more fire resistant. I don't know if that's located anywhere, guys, that you could point to. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Joe, this might be a good one for you.
What was the question again, Andy?
A couple folks were asking, you had mentioned like there's certain types of vegetation or plants that would be more fire resistant that would be recommended to be planted around the home or something in the yard.
Yeah, in general terms, and we can provide that list to you.
Okay.
We actually have a list by species, and it's broken down by native species. But in general terms, all the ones that look pretty and nice are the ones that you don't want. You want the ones that don't look so nice. In reality, anything that might be an evergreen, especially that has shiny cuticle on it that contains oils and resins, or for example, evergreens like arborvitaes are species you probably don't want to plant, especially right next to your home. Even though evergreens, for example, are not deciduous trees, they do shed needles underneath, and embers land in those needles, are able to climb up the evergreen, and then usually in situations where you have ember cast next to houses, it's in evergreens or areas where the vegetation just hasn't been cleaned up. For example, raking leaves and pine needles goes a long way to stop that. But we can provide a list of species that are more conducive to planting around your home.
That would be super helpful. What was this question? Website resources to kind of prepare ourselves. Maybe that just got answered. Jeremy may have already answered that one. Yeah, okay. Jeremy already did answer that. Okay. So just kind of pointing them to a couple websites I had written down was the nfpa.org and then newjerseywildfire.org. So for kind of follow up and more details and what Joe was explaining, just to kind of get, dive a little bit deeper into this stuff, you can visit those websites. Any final thoughts from you guys? It's 8:33, so we're going to kind of wind this thing down. But any final thoughts from you guys? We're really grateful you came, but anything else?
Just want to say thanks for the opportunity to present and hopefully educate the citizens of New Jersey a little bit more about the fire risk in New Jersey and the prevention opportunities.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And our website, njwildfire.org. We have Facebook, we have X, we'd like we try to keep people up to date on, fire conditions. When we do start prescribed burning, we try to notify the public of, within, at best we can, where and when we're burning. So the public's aware of that kind of stuff. So just, anytime you're not sure, if you go on njwildfire.org, you're going to be able to get a lot of information about what's going on in the state related to wildfire.
And if you ever see one of our red trucks around at an event somewhere, stop in and say hi. Those guys would be happy to talk to you.
Great. So just on behalf of everybody here, thank you guys for again taking time to make this presentation, to prepare, and also just for your hard work out there keeping all of us safe. So thank you guys. Thanks everybody for joining us. Again, you can check out YouTube in the next few days. This presentation will be on there. If there's anything you want to watch again, go for it. All right, until next month, we'll see you. Thank you so much.